The ticking of the old wall clock echoed through the cold corners of my studio apartment, a space barely large enough to stretch, let alone dream. But it was mine. No crystal chandeliers, no imported rugs, no portrait hallways with last names carved in marble. Just me. A secondhand couch, a desk I built myself, and a folder tucked under my bed, marked Remington Foundation. Audit, confidential. That folder was the only connection I had left to my father. To them, my mother, my sister, the entire Remington clan. I had always been the misstep in a carefully choreographed dynasty. I didn't wear pearls. I didn't laugh at charity galas. I didn't join country clubs or pose for glossy magazine spreads beside my mother Eleanor or my sister Brielle. While they brunch champagned their way through Manhattan's social ladder, I sat in coding boot camps, lived on takeout dumplings, and built an AI-driven portfolio optimizer from my kitchen table. And my father loved me for it. Frederick Remington saw beyond the diamonds and facades. He was a real estate tycoon, yes, but when he looked at me, he didn't see a disappointment in sneakers. He saw a legacy that thought differently. He used to call me the disruptor, with a grin that made me feel 10 feet tall. You don't need their world. Sav. One day you'll build your own and it'll scare the hell out of them. But he died before that could happen. A heart attack, they said. No warning, no time. I flew back immediately, only to be told the funeral had already passed. A private family moment, Eleanor had texted. No apology, no warmth. Just a period at the end of a sentence that felt like a lifetime disowned. That was the last time I tried to belong. For 2 years, I stayed quiet. I worked, I saved, and I dreamed in silence. My apartment overlooked nothing, but every morning I'd whisper, "Not yet, Dad, but soon until the accident." It was supposed to be a quick retreat, a weekend in upstate New York to unplug. The rain came down harder than I expected, and the deer in the road appeared out of nowhere. I swerved. The car hit a tree. Everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a rural clinic, bandaged, bruised, and missing everything. Wallet, ID, phone. The nurse said a trucker found me unconscious, dragged me out before the engine caught fire. No one could identify me. I asked for a phone. I asked to call my friend Marin. They said not yet. Rest first, but rest was the last thing I got. On the third day, I saw the news on the communal television in the hallway. Tragedy in the Remington family, younger daughter Savannah. Confirmed dead in car explosion. I stared at the screen. The photo was me. The flames behind me were from my car. The headline wasn't a question, it was a death sentence. The room began to spin. I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. I reached for the remote like it was my last link to reality, turned up the volume, and heard Eleanor's voice, calm, composed, pristine. It's a tragedy we will never recover from. Savannah was misunderstood, but she was still ours. And we will honor her memory quietly. I had been erased, not forgotten, deleted. There was no mention of survivors, no plea for information, no DNA confirmation, just gone. And then came the kicker. A source close to the family confirms that the Remington Foundation's board has convened to revise inheritance protocols following Savannah's passing. The tears didn't come at first, only cold. A bitter, violent chill that ran down my spine like truth in winter. My father's voice echoed in my head. You'll scare the hell out of them someday, but I never imagined it would be as a ghost. When I was released, I didn't go home. I had no home, I had no name. I went to the only person I knew wouldn't flinch, Marin Wells, my best friend since college, now a doctor with the kind of heart that no one could fake. When she opened the door and saw me, pale, limping eyes, wild with disbelief, she didn't ask why. She pulled me in. Savannah, I thought you were... I know. We sat in silence for almost an hour. She made tea. I stared at the wall. Neither of us could speak the word dead. When I finally did, she whispered, "Your family." They didn't even hold a real service, just a closed remembrance event, live-streamed like a performance. She pulled up her laptop. I watched them smile for cameras. Brielle in black lace, Eleanor in designer grief. Even my ex, Thomas, the one who dumped me for not being public enough, stood beside them like mourning royalty. I watched my mother accept condolences with the same hands that likely signed off on my obituary. I watched my sister place a single white rose on a portrait of me, the same sister who once called me the Excel file that ruined Christmas, and I saw it behind the podium, a banner. Small, barely visible, board vote following ceremony, 7:30 p.m., the inheritance, the power, the reason I had to die. I closed the laptop and stared at my tea. It had gone cold. I don't think this was an accident, I said. Marin nodded. Then we find out why, she replied, and you take everything back. I looked at my reflection in her window. For the first time, I didn't see the forgotten daughter. I saw the woman they'd tried to bury rising. I used to think the worst pain in life was being forgotten. I was wrong. The worst pain is watching them smile as they erase you. Marin's apartment became my coffin with Wi-Fi. I lay in her guest room breathing, but buried. The headlines didn't stop. Heiress dies and tragic fire Remington matriarch to lead foundation after loss. Savannah's absence marks a new era of elegance. My death was their rebranding. Each article painted me softer than I ever was, quietly rebellious, socially distant, an outlier but loved. I wasn't loved. I was tolerated, until tolerance became inconvenience, and inconvenience became expendable. And now dead. I watched the live stream of my own memorial. 3 nights later, Marin and I sat in silence, the glow of her laptop painting the room like a chapel. They held it at the Remington estate. Of course they did. The grand ballroom was lit like heaven. Chandeliers sparkled above guests in black couture. My portrait stood between 2 columns of lilies printed in soft focus like a perfume ad. Brielle spoke first. My sister's voice hadn't changed. Sweet scripted. Savannah was complicated. She paused for effect, placing a hand on her chest like the stage actress she was. But she was one of us, and that means something. I laughed out loud. Marin winced beside me. You okay? No, I said. But it's the first time they've called me family in public. Brielle went on to list my non-existent charity work, my quiet dedication to legacy, and my fondness for solitude. They made it sound poetic. They made my isolation beautiful. I didn't cry. Not when Brielle faked a tear, not when Eleanor gave her icy eulogy, not even when Thomas, my ex, approached the mic and said, Savannah taught me to think deeply. He once dumped me by text at a brunch I wasn't invited to. But I cried when I saw the vote. It wasn't part of the service. Just a note on the program, visible for a flash of a second when a camera panned. Left board session inheritance, vote to follow. 7:30 p.m. That was the real funeral. Not for me, but for my father's intent. Frederick Remington built that empire brick by brick. He wanted legacy, but more than that, he wanted integrity. He named me co-director of the Remington Foundation the year before he died. Quietly, no press release. He said, let them find out when you sit at the head of the table. That's your style, but they never let me sit. And now, they didn't even wait a week before rewriting his will in lace and lies. Pause it, I said. Marin did. We stared at the frozen frame Eleanor with her hand resting on the shoulder of our longtime attorney Mitchell Kane. A man who once told me, you'll do great things, Savannah, just don't do them too loud. I looked at his face in that frame. He wasn't mourning, he was calculating. I knew that look. I had inherited it. You think they forged something? Marin asked cautiously. No, I said, I think they replaced it. We didn't sleep that night. We went through everything I had saved in the cloud emails from my father, foundation documents, board voting history. I remembered something 2 years ago. He had shown me a handwritten version of his will, just in case he'd said, it wasn't notarized, but it existed, and it stated clearly, 50% of all holdings under the Remington Foundation shall transfer to Savannah L. Remington upon my death. She will co-chair operations and possess final voting power. No legal jargon. Just truth. Truth written in my father's hand. But that will never made it to court. I had asked about it after his death, Mitchell said. That document was superseded by a formalized version, your father's last revision, and like a fool, I accepted it now I knew better. They used my disappearance to erase the inconvenient version of my father's legacy and install one they could puppet. I called a number I hadn't dialed in years. Still using burner phones, Savannah, a voice answered. Deep, dry, unmistakable. Noah, I whispered, I need to disappear better, and then I need to reappear, legally. Noah Ames was once my partner in an online ethics startup. We shut it down after 1 year and 15 cease and desists from billionaires. Now he helps people who vanish by choice or by force. He arrived 2 days later, hood up, smile, crooked. Let me guess, he said, they buried you. Now you want to climb out of the casket? Something like that. He scanned the memorial footage frame by frame, paused on a blurry signature shown in a presentation during the financial legacy slideshow. Zoom in, I said. He did. We compared it to my father's past documents. This one's smoother, Noah said, like someone traced it digitally, forged beautifully, illegally. Can you trace the original file? Not unless I'm inside Mitchell's office or his email archive. You still have access. I nodded. Dad never removed my administrator rights, they probably forgot. We hacked in. 3 hours later, Noah found the smoking gun, a signed will timestamped, uploaded the day after my father's heart attack. Not to the court, not to a notary, but to Eleanor's personal assistant, so they backdated it, Marin said, filed it later, like it was real, but it's not. I said I have his handwriting, I have his voice. I opened a folder. Marin had scanned months ago. An old video from my father's office where he casually read parts of the handwritten will to me while we laughed about the word co-chair. This is gold, Noah whispered. But it won't matter, unless you break the illusion. What illusion that you're dead? That word never stopped sounding strange. Dead, I could breathe, I could bleed, I could break, but to the world I was a name carved into a gravestone that didn't exist. I paced Marin's apartment until dawn, the city slowly stirring outside like a giant, forgetting. It dreamed me. I stared at the window's reflection. My eyes were swollen, my cheeks hollow. I don't look like her, I said. Good, Marin replied. She was the version they chose. This one you is the version you write. Noah looked at me. They planned a 1-year memorial gala, didn't they, for press? To remind everyone how sad they are. Yeah, he grinned. Then that's your stage. Savannah Remington had been buried in silk and fiction. But the real me, I was crawling out breath by breath, ready to set fire to the flowers they laid on my fake grave. The first step to rising from the dead is learning how to haunt the living. I didn't knock when I walked into my father's old law firm. I simply opened the door. Marin had pulled strings. Noah had planted signals. The system still thought I was dead, but that day I was very much alive and armed with silence, sharper than any accusation. The lobby hadn't changed, marble floor, mahogany desk. A receptionist who looked too young to be guarding ghosts. She blinked when she saw me. I smiled like a rumor. I'm here to see Mr. Harold Granger, I said softly. Tell him his dead client would like a word. Granger was the only man my father trusted with documents that mattered. After my father's death, he'd gone dark, resigned from the board. Rumors said he'd moved to Maine. But I found him. They said he lost his fire. They were wrong. When he saw me, he didn't flinch. He poured 2 cups of tea. I always believed you'd come back, he said. Did you know I asked? He nodded. I saw the revision they filed. I knew it wasn't his. But Mitchell Kane had more money, more lawyers, and more cameras. I couldn't stop them. I slid a flash drive across the table. You can now. The file contained everything: my father's original handwritten will, a time-stamped voice memo of him reading it to me, a screenshot of the email sent from Eleanor's assistant to Mitchell with the forged PDF, the foundation's financial transactions showing sudden fund transfers hours after my death. Granger leaned back. His hands trembled slightly. This is enough to burn them down. I don't want fire. I said, I want light. He looked at me curious. I want the truth to speak louder than their lies. I want them to squint. Noah returned that night with a burner laptop and a grin too big to be legal. I broke into the Remington Gala system, he said. They're broadcasting your memorial. Live, full media access. Black Tie Brielle's debut speech as foundation chair. Good, I said. Then I won't have to scream. He raised an eyebrow. You're really going to walk in there? Just show up? I stared at the mirror. My reflection didn't flinch. They used a fake death to erase me, I whispered. I'll use a real presence to erase their future. Marin took care of the look. She found me a dress the color of midnight, sleek and simple. No jewels, no lace, just shadow and silence. She pinned my hair up like armor, gave me lipstick, the shade of old blood. You look like a reckoning, she said. I am. We rehearsed every moment like a war plan. At exactly 8:05 p.m., I would walk through the ballroom doors. The live broadcast would already be rolling. Brielle would be mid-speech. A curated montage of my life would be playing on screens, edited, fictional, sterilized. And then I would arrive, not to interrupt, but to reclaim. The night before the gala, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window in Marin's guest room and watched the city pulse like a machine too big to stop. Was I scared? Yes. Not of them, not of cameras, but of how easy it would have been. To just stay dead, disappear, build another life in another country, let them rot in their illusion. But then I remembered my father's voice. You don't need their approval, Sav, but you do need to finish what I started. The gala arrived like a lie dressed in pearls. Reporters swarmed the Remington estate. Floodlights glared across the marble staircase. Guests arrived in limos, speaking in hushed tones about the tragic loss and the noble legacy. They were dressed for grief, but I was dressed for war. I stayed in the shadows until the broadcast began. The ballroom doors closed, the orchestra played something mournful. Inside, I could see her Brielle at the podium, her hands perfectly manicured, her smile camera tight, and though Savannah left us too soon, she said, voice trembling, "Her legacy will live on, in the hands of those who knew how to shape it, those who knew how to steal it," she meant. I counted 3, 2, 1, and stepped forward. The double doors opened. The air didn't move. At first, no one turned, but then someone gasped, then another. And when Brielle saw me, truly saw me, she froze, mid-sentence, mid-breath. The music stopped. The lights didn't know what to do. The camera feed kept rolling. I walked past guests with champagne flutes, half-raised mouths half open, past reporters lifting phones, past security too stunned to move. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I took the podium. And for a moment the room held its breath. "Good evening," I said. No microphone needed. My voice was enough. I'd like to thank my family for gathering in such elegance to mourn someone they didn't know. Brielle made a sound like a cough wrapped in fear. Eleanor stood. "This is impossible," she whispered. "No, Mother," I said. "This is inevitable." I turned to the camera. "You called me complicated, distant, difficult. Perhaps I was, but I was also the daughter my father trusted, the only one who didn't turn his name into a currency." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. "This is the will he wrote by hand. This is his voice reading it. This," I held up the flash drive, "is the email that erased it." Gasps rippled through the room like thunder and silk. Mitchell Kane stood up. "This isn't legal." "It's truth, Mitchell," I said. "And it's been notarized, recorded, copied to the IRS, the State Board, and every partner foundation." I turned back to the crowd. "You buried me to feed your lies." But the ground refused to keep me. Security tried to move, but it was too late. Reporters surged forward. Flashbulbs exploded like war drums. Brielle's face cracked. Eleanor sat down. Mitchell disappeared behind 2 officers. I handed the microphone to the woman at the live stream desk. "Keep it running," I said. "Let the country watch this family unmake itself." That night I didn't sleep either. But it wasn't dread. It was the stillness after a storm that didn't kill you, and the quiet thrill of knowing. Tomorrow, my name would no longer be buried beneath theirs. There are moments in life that don't just change the course of a story, they silence it. That night I was no longer Savannah, the forgotten daughter I was. Savannah Remington, the woman who returned from the grave not to haunt them, but to replace them. They say silence is the loudest sound in a room full of liars. If that's true, then I detonated a bomb without ever raising my voice. I stood there at the podium. They built to remember me wearing the name. They tried to bury, holding the proof they forged to steal what wasn't theirs. Brielle had frozen behind me. Eleanor clutched her pearls like they could pray away the truth. Mitchell Kane, the family lawyer turned puppeteer, had already slipped halfway out a side door, his hand trembling on a phone he couldn't seem to unlock. The room didn't move, so I moved for them. "This," I said, lifting the handwritten will, "was signed by my father 1 year before his death. In ink, in his office, with witnesses. I placed the page on the podium like a blade. The original, not a copy. Granger had kept it all these years, waiting for the one person brave enough to wield it. 50% of the Remington Foundation. I continued voting power, co-chair status, reserved for the only person in this room who didn't use his death to renovate their social standing." I turned slowly to Brielle. "Tell me, dear sister, what exactly have you chaired in the past year, besides photo shoots and gala menus?" She blinked. Her mascara trembled. Savannah, this isn't—" "It is," I said, softer now. "And you know it." Screens behind us lit up. Noah had synced them perfectly. A slideshow of the Remembrance Gala faded into the real archive. A voice memo of my father laughing with me in his study. A scanned signature analysis showing Eleanor's assistant sent the Forged Will Foundation withdrawals marked in red, totaling $8 million within 48 hours of my death. People gasped. Some turned away, others pulled out their phones and began recording, no longer for the event but for the scandal. And then Eleanor stood. She was still beautiful, still composed, but her mask had slipped just slightly enough for the cold steel beneath to shine through. "This is theater," she said. "You've taken grief and twisted it into vengeance. If you think showing up in a dress and making a scene will bring you legitimacy." I stepped down from the podium, walked toward her, stopped 3 feet away. "You buried me with a headline," I whispered. "Tonight, I return with facts." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out because deep down, she knew. Granger stepped forward next. He spoke calmly, like a man reclaiming a profession from a shadow. "I hereby submit the original testament of Frederick Remington for legal reinstatement." he said, holding the notarized envelope. And I file for immediate injunction against all financial actions taken under the fraudulent version presented by Mr. Mitchell Kane. He turned to the camera. Let the world see what legacy looks like when it chooses truth. Security began to move, not toward me, toward Mitchell. He had reached the garden when they stopped him. His hands went up slowly. A man used to controlling outcomes now being escorted by men who didn't answer to his signature. Reporters swarmed the steps. Is Savannah Remington really alive? Did the Remington family knowingly file a fake death? Is Brielle facing indictment? I didn't answer. The truth didn't need me to. It was already speaking through every headline, every share, every shocked whisper in the ballroom. Brielle tried once more. I didn't know, she said, eyes glassy. I thought you were gone. I grieved for you. I nodded. I'm sure the checkbook helped dry the tears. And then I turned away from her slowly, deliberately, like someone closing a book they once begged to be part of. Later that night, I sat alone in my father's study. The house had gone quiet. Empty, no guests, no staff. Just the scent of old leather and a faint trace of his cologne still lingering in the wood. I ran my hand over the desk. The last time I sat here, I was 25, showing him a prototype of the app I built to help small nonprofits optimize donations. He called it smarter than half his board combined. I smiled, then cried, not for what they did, but for what he never got to see. There was a knock. I turned, expecting security, but it was Marin. She stepped in, holding a small envelope. What's this? I asked. It came by courier, she said. Addressed to you, no return name. I opened it. Inside was a photo of me, taken 2 weeks before the crash. At a small cafe near the river, there was a note scribbled on the back. We knew, and we watched anyway. Some ghosts haunt in silence, others return to burn the house down. You chose better. Finish it. No signature. Just truth and threat. I stared at the fireplace. My reflection looked back from the brass frame above it, not as a ghost, but as something worse. A woman who survived being erased, and now had the power to rewrite the ending. You can fake a will, you can forge a death, you can manipulate a legacy, but you can't kill someone who was already invisible to begin with, because when they come back untouchable. And now, they'd have to watch me rebuild on top of the ashes they tried to bury me under. They say resurrection changes a person, but they're wrong. It doesn't change you, it reveals you. And when the dirt is brushed off and the coffin's lid cracked open, what comes out isn't a saint or a sinner. It's the version of you no one was ready to face. The fallout was fast, brutal, and surgical. Within 72 hours of the gala, headlines shifted from tragic heiress returns to foundation fraud, exposed, and Remington matriarch, under federal investigation. Mitchell Kane was disbarred by Monday. Brielle's assets were frozen by Wednesday. And Eleanor. She didn't speak to the press. Not once. She simply vanished. Like I once did, poetic really. But I didn't vanish, I stayed. I attended every board meeting, I shook hands with every donor I signed, every document with a pen my father once used. Its weight, familiar, its ink, unforgiving. I wasn't just rebuilding the Remington Foundation, I was reconstructing it from the bone marrow out. Gone were the staged galas and padded press releases. Gone were the silent partners with too many secrets and too little heart. In their place, grants for single mothers, shelters for displaced women, legal support for those fighting to reclaim what was stolen. We renamed the first new program the Phoenix Grant. I didn't need to explain why. The ones who mattered already knew. 1 month after the memorial, I stood again in the Remington Estate's Great Hall. This time not as a ghost, but as the host. The chandeliers had been dimmed, the velvet curtains replaced by light linen. Every portrait that once hung in stiff silence had been taken down. Every one but one, my father's. He smiled in that painting like he always did, like he knew. I lit a single candle beneath it and whispered, I'm still your girl. Just louder now. Behind me, footsteps. Granger entered, quiet as always. He handed me a small envelope. I thought you'd want this, he said. It arrived today. Probate ruling. I opened it. Black ink, gold seal. No dramatics. Just 4 words that thundered through my chest. Custody of estate, Savannah Remington. No loopholes, no contest, no more lies. Later that night, I walked the estate grounds barefoot, feeling the soil beneath me like a map I'd once forgotten. There were places here they never let me go as a child. Rooms I was told weren't mine. Trees. I wasn't allowed to climb a piano. I was never asked to play. But now, everything was unlocked. I stopped in front of the West Wing, the grand ballroom, the place where they tried to bury me in silence and string quartets. It had always been a symbol of power, so I changed it. We renovated the space into a community justice center, a place where women could walk in broken and walk out with documents, dignity, and a plan. The gold-plated plaque at the entrance reads, "This house once hosted the lies that erased me. Now it shelters the truths they fear." One morning, as I was reviewing blueprints, I received a letter, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a check, $5,000, signed Brielle. There was no note, just a line scribbled across the memo space, for something real. This time, I didn't cash it, I didn't reply, but I didn't tear it up either. Some scars deserve to stay on paper, so we don't forget how deep they once ran. And then came the call I never expected Eleanor. She was at a private clinic somewhere in the South. Treatment, the nurse said, for exhaustion. Her voice when I answered was thinner than I remembered. "Savannah, you won. I didn't speak. You always were. Too much like him." That made me smile, quietly, sharply. "I take that as a compliment," I said. There was silence, and then a question I never thought I'd hear from her lips. Was it worth it? I closed my eyes. Let the wind speak for me. Then I said, "It wasn't about worth, it was about truth." Click, I didn't call back. Some endings don't need sequels. 6 months later, the Remington Foundation was featured in Time. They called it the most transparent transformation of old money in a decade. But I didn't care about praise. I cared about a girl in Detroit who received a grant to fight her wrongful eviction. About a woman in Georgia who walked into our center sobbing and walked out a legal guardian again. About me sitting alone one night in the study staring at a mirror and realizing I no longer flinched at my own reflection. I didn't seek revenge. I claimed restoration. I didn't want them ruined. I wanted me rebuilt. And I did it quietly, completely. Some people write legacies with ink and lawyers, but some of us, we write it in survival, in silence, in rising from a grave we never asked for and turning it into a stage. My name is Savannah Remington. I was declared dead to the world, and in return I built one that finally heard me breathe.